In the shadowed halls of a sprawling estate nestled in the rolling hills of Georgia, where the air hung heavy with the scent of magnolias and unspoken resentments, a young man named Elias had spent his entire life confined to the cold embrace of a wheelchair. Born into unimaginable wealth, the son of a millionaire tycoon whose empire spanned cotton fields and factories, Elias had never felt the earth beneath his feet. Doctors from across the country, with their starched coats and clipped accents, had poked and prodded, declaring his paralysis incurable, a cruel twist of fate from birth that left his legs lifeless, symbols of a family's fractured legacy. The mansion buzzed with servants who averted their eyes, whispering of curses or divine punishment, but none dared challenge the invisible barriers that kept Elias isolated in his gilded prison. Then she arrived. A new maid, hired in a moment of desperation when the household staff dwindled amid rumors of unfair wages and harsh treatment. Her name was Clara, a black woman in her 40s with calloused hands that spoke of years toiling in fields not unlike those owned by her employer. She moved through the rooms with quiet determination, her dark skin a stark contrast to the pale portraits of ancestors lining the walls, men who had built their fortunes on the backs of enslaved people, their legacies steeped in the blood of racial injustice. The tycoon, Mr. Harrington, had reluctantly agreed to her employment, his face twisting in disdain as he muttered about standards and reliability, echoes of the prejudices that had long poisoned his world view. From the start, something shifted. Clara's presence stirred the stagnant air, her gentle hums of old spirituals floating through the corridors like forbidden melodies. Elias, from his window overlooking the vast lawns, caught glimpses of her, polishing silver with rhythmic grace, her eyes holding stories of resilience forged in the fires of segregation and discrimination. But as days turned to weeks, whispers grew louder, accusations of overstepping, of meddling where she didn't belong. The household teetered on the edge of eruption, racial tension simmering beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. Yet, in the quiet moments, Clara approached Elias not with pity, but with a spark of defiance, her actions hinting at a miracle that defied medical logic and societal norms. What impossible feat could this woman, dismissed by so many as mere help, achieve in a world designed to keep her down? The answer would shatter barriers, both physical and invisible, forcing a reckoning with the deep-seated injustices that had long defined their lives. The Harrington estate stood as a monument to old Southern opulence, its white columns rising, like sentinels against the azure sky, guarding secrets buried deep in the red clay soil. Built in the antebellum era, the mansion had witnessed the rise and fall of fortunes, its walls absorbing the echoes of whips and chains from a time when Mr. Harrington's great-grandfathers ruled with iron fists. Now, in the mid-20th century, the year 1958, the civil rights movement simmered on the horizon, but within these walls, time seemed frozen in prejudice. Mr. Harrington, a stern man in his 50s with a mustache as sharp as his business acumen, oversaw a textile empire that still exploited black laborers in ways that skirted the edges of legality. His wife, frail and withdrawn, spent her days in the parlor, sipping tea and ignoring the world's changing tides. Elias, their only son, was the center of this fragile universe. At 22, he possessed a sharp mind trapped in a body that betrayed him. Paralyzed from the waist down since birth due to a rare spinal condition, he had been schooled by private tutors, his world limited to books, the view from his second-floor room, and the occasional visitor who treated him like fragile glass. The family had poured fortunes into treatments, experimental surgeries in New York, therapies from European specialists, but nothing stirred life into his limbs. Mr. Harrington viewed his son's affliction as a personal failure, a stain on the family name, often retreating to his study to drown frustrations in whiskey, his outbursts laced with blame toward fate or, subtly, toward the inferior. Help, he believed, cursed his lineage. The hiring of Clara came amid a staff shortage. Previous maids, mostly white women from nearby towns, had left complaining of low pay and Mr. Harrington's temper. Desperate, the housekeeper turned to the local black community, where word spread of an opening. Clara, recently widowed and supporting her aging mother in a segregated neighborhood, applied with quiet resolve. She had endured Jim Crow laws all her life, separate water fountains, back entrances, the constant hum of degradation. Yet her spirit remained unbroken, nurtured by church gatherings and stories of ancestors who had survived the Middle Passage. When she stepped into the mansion for her interview, Mr. Harrington's gaze lingered with suspicion, his questions probing her loyalty and cleanliness, veiled barbs that Clara met with steady eyes and measured responses. From her first day, Clara immersed herself in the rhythm of the house. She rose before dawn, scrubbing floors that gleamed under her touch, preparing meals infused with subtle flavors from her heritage, cornbread with a hint of spice, greens simmered slow. But it was Elias who drew her attention. Assigned to clean his wing, she noticed how he stared out the window, his books scattered like forgotten dreams. Curiosity built slowly. She began lingering, straightening his room with care, placing fresh flowers by his bed, small acts that went unnoticed by others but sparked a flicker in his eyes. The household watched warily, whispers of "she's getting too familiar" circulating in the kitchen. Mr. Harrington, influenced by the era's rampant segregationist views, harbored doubts, his prejudices rooted in fears of mixing that echoed the broader societal unrest. Little did he know, Clara's presence was planting seeds of change, her resilience a quiet challenge to the injustices woven into the fabric of their world, building toward a confrontation that would test the boundaries of empathy and equality. As weeks unfolded into months, the Harrington estate became a cauldron of simmering tensions, where the air grew thick with the unspoken weight of racial divides. Clara moved through her duties with the grace of someone who had long learned to navigate hostile terrains, her footsteps soft on the polished oak floors that had once been trodden by enslaved feet. She polished the silver heirlooms, forks, and knives engraved with the family crest, each stroke a reminder of the labor that built this wealth, labor like her own, unacknowledged and undervalued. In the segregated South of 1958, where buses were divided and schools separate, Clara's role as a black maid in a white household was a precarious balance, one misstep away from dismissal or worse. Elias, confined to his wheelchair, found his days blending into a monotonous haze until Clara's arrivals punctuated them. She began with small gestures, adjusting his blankets with a mother's tenderness, opening curtains to let sunlight flood the room, chasing away the shadows that mirrored his isolation. He watched her, intrigued by the stories etched in her face. The fine lines around her eyes from squinting against the sun in cotton fields as a child, the firm set of her jaw from enduring slurs hurled by white overseers. Clara's hands, rough from years of scrubbing and picking, moved with purpose, and in those moments Elias felt a curiosity stir within him, a desire to understand the world beyond his windows. But the household's undercurrents of prejudice began to surface. The housekeeper, Mrs. Ellis, a white woman in her 60s with a pinched expression, eyed Clara with suspicion. "Don't get too close to the boy," she warned in hushed tones during kitchen breaks, her words laced with the casual racism of the era. "Mr. Harrington won't stand for it. Folks like you have your place." Clara swallowed the bitterness, recalling her own experiences, being forced to enter stores through back doors, denied service at lunch counters, the constant vigilance required, to survive in a society that viewed her as lesser. She nodded politely, but inside, a fire burned, fueled by memories of her father's arrest for loitering in a white neighborhood, a trumped-up charge that left her family destitute. As Clara's interactions with Elias deepened, she shared fragments of her life in subtle ways. While dusting his bookshelves, She hummed tunes from Negro spirituals, songs of hope and deliverance that had sustained her people through slavery and beyond. Elias, educated but sheltered, listened intently, his mind opening to histories omitted from his textbooks, the horrors of lynchings, the resilience of the Underground Railroad, the ongoing fight against segregation. One afternoon, as rain pattered against the panes, Clara paused by his side, her voice low as she described her childhood in a sharecropper's shack, where dreams were stifled by the weight of systemic oppression. Elias's heart ached with a newfound empathy, his own suffering paling against the generational injustices she described. Yet this budding connection ignited jealousy and fear among the staff. Rumors spread like wildfire through the servants' quarters. "She's filling his head with ideas," one cook muttered. "Next thing, he'll be sympathizing with those troublemakers in Montgomery." The reference to the bus boycott, led by figures like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., hung heavy, a reminder of the civil rights stirrings that threatened the status quo. Mr. Harrington, catching wind of these whispers, summoned Clara to his study one evening. The room, lined with leather-bound volumes and portraits of Confederate ancestors, felt oppressive. He paced, his face flushed, accusing her of overstepping boundaries. "Your kind knows better than to meddle," he growled, his words echoing the racist rhetoric of segregationists like George Wallace. Clara stood tall, her dignity a shield, but the encounter left her shaken, a stark reminder of the power imbalances that could crush her at any moment. Undeterred, Clara pressed on, her resolve hardened by personal losses. Her husband had died, young, worked to death in a factory owned by men like Harrington, denied medical care because of his race. She saw in Elias a chance for redemption, not just for him, but for the system that bound them both. She began incorporating subtle exercises into her routine, inspired by folk remedies from her community, gentle massages with herbal oils, encouragement to shift his weight, drawing from stories of healers in her lineage who had mended bodies, broken by labor and violence. Elias responded, his muscles twitching faintly for the first time, a spark of hope amid the despair. As summer faded into fall, the estate's atmosphere grew charged. Protests erupted in nearby towns, black communities demanding equal rights, met with hoses and dogs from white authorities. Newsreels flickered on the family's television, images of sit-ins and marches that Mr. Harrington dismissed as agitators stirring trouble. Elias, influenced by Clara's quiet narratives, began questioning his father's views, his voice gaining strength in private conversations. Why must things stay this way? He pondered, his mind racing with visions of a more just world. The rising tensions culminated in small acts of sabotage. Anonymous notes appeared in Clara's quarters, scrawled with slurs and threats, echoes of the Ku Klux Klan's intimidation tactics that terrorized black families. One night, her belongings were rifled through, a cherished photo of her family torn. Clara's fear mingled with anger, recalling the bombing of churches in Birmingham, the murders of activists like Medgar Evers. She confided in Elias during a late-night cleaning session, her words painting vivid pictures of the struggle. The pain of being denied voting rights, the humiliation of colored-only signs. Elias's empathy deepened, his own immobility mirroring the societal constraints on her people. Mr. Harrington's prejudices escalated. He hired a white nurse to oversee Elias's care, relegating Clara to menial tasks, a move that reeked of segregation. The nurse, indifferent and mechanical, lacked Clara's warmth, and Elias withdrew, his progress stalling. Clara, now cleaning the lower floors, stole moments to visit, smuggling in encouragement like hidden contraband. Their bond became a secret. Resistance, a microcosm of the larger civil rights movement. Months passed, marked by incremental victories and setbacks. Clara introduced strengthening routines disguised as games, reaching for objects, balancing on the edge of his bed, drawing from her knowledge of physical therapy gleaned from community elders who had rehabilitated lynching survivors. Elias's legs showed signs of life, a twitch, a cramp, then voluntary movement in his toes. Excitement built, but so did danger. The staff's resentment boiled over when Elias defended Clara during a dinner mishap, his words challenging the household's hierarchy. In the broader world, the Civil Rights Act loomed, but locally, backlash intensified. A cross burned on a neighbor's lawn, a warning to sympathizers. Clara felt the noose tightening, her presence a perceived threat. Yet, she persisted, her actions a testament to the quiet heroism of black women like Fannie Lou Hamer, who endured beatings for demanding equality. As winter approached, Elias's secret sessions with Clara intensified. She shared tales of the Great Migration, her family's flight from lynch mobs, instilling in him a sense of shared humanity. His body responded, muscles awakening from dormancy, but the emotional stakes soared. Mr. Harrington, sensing change, interrogated the staff, his fury directed at Clara. Accusations flew. Theft, insubordination, veiled in racial bias. Clara faced eviction, her livelihood hanging by a thread. The tension peaked during a stormy night. Elias, in a burst of determination, attempted to stand, his legs buckling but holding briefly. Clara caught him, their eyes meeting in silent triumph. But the moment was overheard, sparking a confrontation. Mr. Harrington burst in, his face contorted in rage, spewing epithets rooted in centuries of white supremacy. "You think you can change my son with your voodoo?" he thundered, evoking stereotypes of black mysticism. Clara stood firm, her voice steady as she recounted her own injustices, the denial of education, the loss of loved ones to discriminatory health care. Elias, from his chair, pleaded for understanding, his words bridging the divide. The room crackled with emotion, the estate's foundations shaking metaphorically as old prejudices clashed with emerging truths. In the days that followed, Elias's progress accelerated, his legs gaining strength through persistent efforts. Clara's methods, blending traditional healing with sheer willpower, defied medical expectations. But the household fractured further. Staff quit, alliances shifted, and external pressures mounted as news of civil rights advancements filtered in. The Supreme Court's rulings, the March on Washington looming in collective memory. Elias began wheeling himself farther, exploring the grounds with Clara's guidance, his world expanding. He learned of redlining, voter suppression, the economic disparities that kept black families in poverty while men like his father profited. Shame washed over him, fueling his resolve to walk, not just for himself, but as a symbol of breaking chains. Clara, meanwhile, faced escalating harassment. Anonymous calls threatened her family, reminiscent of the terror tactics used against NAACP members. She wavered, considering leaving, but Elias's pleas anchored her. Their sessions became clandestine, held in the estate's forgotten attic where dust motes danced in slanted light and stories of resistance flowed freely. As spring bloomed, Elias achieved milestones, standing with support, taking aided steps. The physical transformation mirrored an emotional one as he confronted his privilege. Mr. Harrington, witnessing glimpses, grappled with denial, his worldview cracking under the weight of evidence. The rising action built to a fever pitch when a local riot erupted, sparked by a police brutality incident against black protesters. The estate felt the ripples, with workers divided. Clara's nephew was arrested unjustly, amplifying her pain. Elias, moved, used his influence to intervene, a first act of allyship. Through it all, Clara's resilience shone, her story intertwining with Elias's, highlighting the intersections of disability and racial injustice. The stakes rose. If discovered, Clara could face violence. For Elias, failure meant eternal confinement. Yet hope flickered, a beacon in the darkness of prejudice. The storm that had been brewing over the Harrington estate finally broke on a sweltering August afternoon, the sky darkening as if mirroring the turmoil within. Elias, his body trembling with anticipation and fear, had progressed to the point where standing unaided was no longer a dream but a tantalizing possibility. Clara, her face etched with determination, had arranged a secret session in the sun-dappled conservatory, away from prying eyes. The glass walls enclosed them in a world of lush plants and humid air, a sanctuary amid the chaos. As Clara positioned Elias's wheelchair near a sturdy table for support, the door burst open. Mr. Harrington stood there, his face a mask of fury, flanked by the housekeeper and the white nurse, their expressions smug with vindication. What in God's name is going on here? The words hung heavy, but without dialogue, the intensity radiated from his clenched fists and narrowed eyes. He had been tipped off by a loyal staff member, the culmination of months of suspicion. Clara froze, her heart pounding, memories of past confrontations flashing, being chased from jobs for uppity behavior, witnessing friends beaten for demanding fair pay. Elias, caught mid-attempt to rise, felt a surge of protectiveness, his body straining against its limits. The room crackled with unspoken accusations, racial slurs implied in Harrington's glare, evoking the lynch mobs of yesteryear. Harrington advanced, his presence dominating, pointing accusatorily at Clara, his body language screaming betrayal. The nurse stepped forward, her hands reaching to wheel Elias away, dismissing Clara's efforts as quackery. But Elias resisted, his grip on the table tightening, muscles forged through secret toil quivering. In that charged moment, Clara met Harrington's eyes, her posture unyielding, a living embodiment of the women who had faced down Bull Connor's dogs. She gestured subtly to Elias, urging him onward, her faith unwavering. The tension peaked as Harrington lunged to separate them, his prejudices boiling over into physical aggression. Elias, drawing on every ounce of strength, pushed upward. His legs, once lifeless, bore his weight. A step forward, faltering, but real. The room stilled, the impossible unfolding. Harrington halted, shock rippling across his features. Clara's eyes welled with pride, her sacrifices validated in that instant. The climax intensified as Elias took another step, then another, toward his father, bridging the physical and metaphorical divide. Harrington's world shattered, confronted, with the miracle wrought by the woman he had demeaned. Emotions surged, regret, awe, the crumbling of long-held biases. Clara stood aside, her role complete, the intensity of the moment underscoring the triumph over injustice. In the aftermath of that transformative moment, the Harrington estate transformed from a bastion of prejudice into a tentative haven of change. Elias, now walking with increasing confidence, though aided by a cane in the early days, explored the grounds freely, his steps a testament to perseverance. Clara remained, her position secured not by force, but by the undeniable proof of her impact. Mr. Harrington, humbled, began a slow journey of self-reflection, his empire's practices scrutinized through a new lens. He implemented fair wages for Black workers, inspired by Clara's stories, contributing to local civil rights efforts, anonymously at first, then openly. The household staff, witnessing the shift, softened, racial barriers eroding like sandcastles in the tide. Elias became an advocate, using his privilege to amplify voices like Clara's, supporting desegregation initiatives. Clara, empowered, shared, her wisdom more freely, her life a bridge between worlds. The story's impact rippled outward, inspiring reflections on how individual acts of kindness can dismantle systemic racism. What if one person's defiance could spark a chain reaction, challenging us all to confront our biases? In a world still grappling with injustice, such tales remind us that change begins with empathy, urging viewers to engage, reflect, and act.